was a duchy people spoke of with admiration. Its fertile fields stretched beyond the horizon, its markets overflowed with prosperity, and its villages flourished beneath wise governance. Yet among all the wonders of the land, none was discussed more often than a young woman named Alice. At 22 years old, Alice possessed a beauty so remarkable that travelers carried stories of her across the kingdom. Artists journeyed for weeks hoping to paint her likeness. Merchants described her as a vision worthy of legend. Noble ladies her fashion, while poets compared her smile to the first light of dawn. Yet beauty alone could never explain why so many people loved her. Alice had earned admiration long before her appearance became famous. She had lost both parents before reaching adulthood, leaving her with a modest estate burdened by debt and neglect. While others expected her to fail, she chose to fight. She learned bookkeeping from aging clerks, studied crop management from farmers, and spent countless hours restoring the lands her family had nearly lost. Years of effort transformed hardship into stability. The tenants who worked her fields respected her because she never asked them to endure difficulties she would not face herself. During poor harvests, she reduced rents. When illness spread through nearby villages, she personally delivered supplies. Whenever someone needed help, Alice appeared without expecting anything in return. Her kindness became as famous as her beauty. One warm afternoon, she stood in a wheat field reviewing ledgers while workers harvested grain nearby. Sweat glistened along her brow, but she paid it little attention. "You work too hard, my lady," an elderly farmer remarked. Alice smiled and closed the ledger. "If I stop working, everyone else will have to work twice as hard." The farmer laughed softly. "That's exactly why people respect you." Alice appreciated the compliment, yet she never considered herself extraordinary. She simply understood what it felt like to struggle and refused to ignore the struggles of others. Far away, beyond the villages and rolling countryside, another life unfolded within the grand palace. Duke Adrien ruled at only 24 years of age. Unlike Alice, admiration followed him for very different reasons. People respected his intelligence, his discipline, and his ability to govern. Under his leadership, trade increased and crime decreased. Noble families sought his approval. Political rivals feared his sharp mind. Yet few people truly knew him. Adrien had been raised by a father who viewed affection as weakness. Every mistake had been criticized. Every emotion had been suppressed. As a result, Adrien learned to hide his feelings behind a calm, distant exterior. His subjects saw confidence. His advisors saw competence. Very few saw loneliness. Most days began before sunrise and ended long after darkness settled over the duchy. Meetings consumed his mornings. Reports filled his afternoons. Political disputes occupied his evenings. He rarely allowed himself rest. One evening, while reviewing documents in his study, his closest advisor placed an invitation on the desk. "The royal anniversary celebration is next month," the advisor said. Adrien glanced briefly at the elegant parchment. "Send my acceptance. You do realize attendance involves socializing." "I am aware." The advisor sighed. "Perhaps speaking to people occasionally would improve your mood." "My mood is irrelevant." The advisor chuckled. "That answer proves my point." Despite his reputation, Adrien was not cruel. He simply found human relationships difficult. Responsibilities felt predictable, emotions did not. Weeks later, nobles from across the kingdom gathered in the capital for the royal celebration. Music filled magnificent halls while crystal chandeliers illuminated hundreds of distinguished guests. Adrien attended out of obligation. His expectations remained low. He intended to exchange polite greetings, fulfill his duties, and live. Then he saw her. Across the ballroom stood a young woman wearing a simple blue gown. She was undeniably beautiful, yet countless beautiful women attended royal events. What captured his attention was something else. While nobles competed for attention and status, she listened patiently to an elderly guest who seemed forgotten by everyone else. Her expression carried genuine warmth. Her smile appeared effortless rather than calculated. For reasons he could not explain, Adrien found himself watching her. "Who is she?" he asked quietly. His advisor followed his gaze. "Alice." The name meant nothing to him. At least not yet. Throughout the evening he noticed her repeatedly. She treated servants with the same respect she offered nobles. She spoke intelligently without arrogance. People naturally gravitated toward her presence. For the first time in years, Adrien felt curiosity replacing routine. Before the celebration ended, he approached her. "Lady." Alice turned toward him and immediately recognized the Duke. Your Grace. Their conversation began formally but soon flowed with surprising ease. They discussed agriculture, trade, village development, and literature. Adrien expected shallow pleasantries. Instead, he discovered someone thoughtful, observant, and refreshingly honest. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. When the evening concluded, Adrien realized something unsettling. He wanted to see her again. Over the following months, he found reasons to visit her estate. Officially, he inspected agricultural improvements. Unofficially, he enjoyed her company. Alice noticed the pattern but never mentioned it. Each meeting revealed new qualities. She admired his dedication too. He admired her compassion. She challenged his assumptions. He respected her opinions. Slowly, admiration deepened into affection. For Alice, the change arrived gradually. For Adrien, it arrived all at once. One spring evening, while walking through a garden filled with blooming roses, he stopped beside her. I find myself thinking about you constantly, he admitted. Alice's heartbeat quickened. Adrien continued before doubt could silence him. When something good happens, I want to tell you. When something difficult happens, I look for you. I've spent years believing duty mattered more than anything else. His voice softened. Then I met you. Alice felt emotion rise within her chest. For the first time, she saw beyond the Duke's composed exterior and glimpsed the sincerity beneath it. Months later, church bells echoed throughout as thousands gathered to celebrate their wedding. The kingdom rejoiced. People called it a perfect match. A beloved beauty and a powerful duke. A woman and an honorable ruler. The future appeared bright. Alice believed she had found a partner she could trust with her heart. Adrien believed he had found the one person who made life feel larger than duty. Neither realized that love was not the difficult part. Keeping it alive would prove far harder. Several months after the wedding, Alice sat alone beside a window overlooking the palace gardens. A candle flickered on the table beside her. Dinner had long since grown cold. She glanced toward the door, hoping to hear familiar footsteps. But beyond the silence of the corridor, only the distant sound of work continued deep within the palace. The first months of marriage passed like a beautiful dream neither Alice nor Adrien wanted to end. They shared quiet breakfasts in the palace gardens, evening walks beneath golden sunsets, and conversations that stretched long into the night. For a brief period, the world seemed perfectly balanced. Alice believed she had found not only a husband but a partner, while Adrien found himself experiencing a happiness he had never known before. Yet happiness, when neglected, can slowly fade without either person realizing it. As summer deepened across, responsibilities began demanding more of Adrien's attention. Trade agreements required negotiation. Border disputes emerged between neighboring territories. Noble families competed for influence, each expecting the Duke's involvement. What began as occasional absences gradually became a routine. Adrien started leaving before sunrise. He often returned long after midnight. At first, Alice understood. She knew his position carried obligations few people could imagine. Whenever servants expressed concern about his exhausting schedule, she defended him. The duchy needs him, she would say. And he needs rest, they would reply. Alice always smiled, believing things would improve soon. But weeks turned into months. The palace grew larger whenever Adrien was absent. Its corridors seemed quieter. Its evenings felt colder. Many nights Alice sat alone in the dining hall, staring at untouched food while waiting for footsteps that never came. Sometimes she would remain awake until midnight, determined to greet her husband when he returned. Yet exhaustion usually claimed her first. More than once Adrien entered their chamber to find her sleeping in a chair beside the window, a book resting in her lap and a candle burning low. He always covered her with a blanket before going to bed. He always brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. And he always left before she woke. These small acts were expressions of love. Unfortunately, Alice never witnessed them. One morning she arranged a surprise breakfast in the garden where they had spent so much time before their wedding. Fresh flowers decorated the table. His favorite pastries had been prepared. She even postponed several meetings with estate managers so they could spend a few hours together. The table remained untouched. A messenger arrived instead. His Grace apologizes, the young servant said carefully. An urgent meeting has been called. Alice thanked him politely. When the servant left, she sat alone among the flowers. The disappointment hurt more than she expected. Not because Adrien had chosen duty, because she feared he no longer chose her. Meanwhile, Adrien remained unaware of the growing distance between them. His love for Alice had not diminished. If anything, it had become deeper. He carried a miniature portrait of her inside his coat. He reread her letters during long meetings. Whenever merchants praised improvements within the duchy, he remembered ideas Alice had suggested months earlier. Yet expressing affection still felt unnatural. His father's lessons lingered in his mind. Emotions created vulnerability. Vulnerability invited pain. As a result, he convinced himself that working harder for was another way of loving his wife. He never realized she needed his presence more than his sacrifices. One evening, while reviewing financial reports, his advisor studied him carefully. "You should go home." Adrien continued reading. "I am home." The advisor sighed. "No, the palace is where you work. Alice is your home." Adrien paused briefly before returning to the documents. The hesitation lasted only seconds, but it revealed more than words ever could. Across the kingdom, another pair of eyes watched their marriage with growing resentment. Lady Victoria Hawthorne had spent years imagining herself beside Adrien. She possessed wealth, status, and beauty, yet none of it mattered. The Duke had chosen Alice. Every public appearance deepened Victoria's humiliation. Nobles praised Alice's grace. Citizens admired her kindness. Even servants spoke warmly about the Duchess. Victoria's jealousy slowly transformed into obsession. At first, she merely criticized Alice behind closed doors. Soon, criticism became manipulation. Manipulation became planning. And planning became something far more dangerous. Victoria understood that destroying a strong marriage required patience. She began spreading subtle rumors among noble circles. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, only carefully chosen suggestions. Questions disguised as concern. Doubts disguised as observations. She implied Alice maintained suspicious correspondence. She hinted that certain estate decisions benefited rival nobles. She planted seeds and waited for them to grow. Most people dismissed the gossip. Unfortunately, a few did not. Victoria's next step proved even more effective. She bribed a palace servant struggling with gambling debts. The servant provided access to documents and private schedules. Using that information, Victoria forged letters designed to appear authentic. The letters suggested secret meetings, hidden agreements, possible betrayals. Each false document seemed convincing because it contained details only someone close to the palace could know. Weeks later, whispers began reaching Adrien. Initially, he ignored them. The accusations felt ridiculous. Alice had never given him reason to doubt her. Still, the rumors persisted. Different sources repeated similar claims. Different nobles raised identical concerns. Gradually, certainty became uncertainty. Not because Adrien trusted the rumors, because constant repetition wears down even the strongest confidence. One afternoon, he discovered a forged letter among official correspondence. The handwriting resembled Alice's. The seal appeared genuine. The contents suggested communication with a political rival. Adrien stared at the document for several minutes. Logic told him something felt wrong. Emotion whispered a more troubling possibility. He locked the letter away without mentioning it. That evening, Alice noticed his unusual silence during dinner. "Is something troubling you?" she asked gently. Adrien looked at her. The concern in her eyes appeared sincere. For a moment, he almost revealed everything. Almost. Instead, he shook his head. "Nothing important." The answer created another small distance between them. Alice lowered her gaze. Adrien returned to his thoughts. Neither recognized the damage caused by that brief exchange. Days passed, then weeks. The forged evidence. Each new accusation strengthened the previous one. Victoria carefully ensured every rumor arrived when Adrien was exhausted, distracted, or overwhelmed by political pressure. She understood timing as well as deception. By autumn, Adrien found himself trapped between love and doubt. He wanted to trust Alice completely, yet questions lingered in the shadows of his mind. Questions he hated. Questions he never should have entertained. One evening, Victoria requested a private audience. Adrien nearly refused. Nearly. Instead, he allowed her inside his study. She carried a sealed packet. Her expression appeared reluctant, as though she wished she were anywhere else. I struggled with whether to bring this to you, she said softly. Adrien's stomach tightened. What is it? Victoria placed the packet on his desk. Evidence. The word hung heavily between them. Slowly, Adrien opened the documents. Letter after letter, record after record, every piece carefully crafted to appear genuine. The room grew silent. Outside, darkness settled over. Inside, doubt tightened its grip around a man's heart. By the time Adrien finished reading, exhaustion, confusion, and anger churned together into something dangerous. He rose abruptly from his chair. Victoria remained silent. She knew she had won. Adrien grabbed his coat and strode toward the door. At that exact moment, miles away within the palace, Alice stood beside a window waiting for her husband to return. A hopeful smile touched her lips when she heard approaching footsteps. She had no idea that the man walking toward her carried enough suspicion to shatter everything they had built together. The moment Adrien entered the palace, the atmosphere felt different. His footsteps echoed through the marble corridors with unusual force. Servants quickly moved aside, sensing the tension radiating from their duke. The forged letters remained fresh in his mind, poisoning every memory he had shared with Alice. Reason urged him to stop, to think, to investigate further. But exhaustion and wounded pride drowned out reason's voice. For months he had ignored rumors. For months he had defended Alice in his own thoughts. Now the carefully manufactured evidence seemed to confirm every doubt he had struggled to suppress. Meanwhile, Alice waited in the sitting room beside their private chambers. A warm fire crackled in the hearth. She had spent the evening preparing a meal herself, hoping to surprise Adrien after another long day. When she heard the door open, relief immediately softened her features. Adrien, you're finally home. She rose with a gentle smile. The smile nearly broke him. For one brief second, he saw the woman he loved. The woman who had transformed his lonely existence. The woman whose presence made every burden feel lighter. Then he remembered the documents. The accusations. The lies he believed were truths. His expression hardened. Alice's smile slowly faded. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. Adrien, she asked carefully. He removed several folded papers from his coat and threw them onto a nearby table. Explain these. Confusion crossed her face. She picked up the documents and scanned the contents. The color drained from her cheeks. I've never seen these before. The answer should have reassured him. Instead, suspicion sharpened his anger. Convenient. Alice looked up immediately. Adrien, they're forged. Are they? Of course they are. The certainty in her voice only frustrated him further. Months of hidden doubts erupted all at once. Everyone seems to have the same explanation. Alice stared at him in disbelief. What are you talking about? Do not pretend ignorance. The accusation struck harder than any shout could have. For the first time since their marriage, Alice felt something frightening growing between them. Distrust. She set the papers down carefully. Look at me. Adrien remained silent. Look at me and tell me you truly believe I would betray you. His jaw tightened. The answer should have been easy. Instead, hesitation filled the room. Alice saw it. That hesitation shattered something inside her. Not because he accused her. Because he was capable of believing it. Tears gathered in her eyes. You actually doubt me. Adrien looked away. The sight of her pain twisted his chest, yet pride refused to release its grip. I don't know what to believe anymore. The words landed like a blade. Alice stepped backward. For months she had waited alone. Defended his absences. Excused his distance. Loved him without complaint. And now this. After everything, he doubted her character. She struggled to steady her voice. Then you never truly knew me. The statement should have ended the argument. Instead, it pushed Adrien beyond restraint. Weeks of pressure from political crises. Months of manipulation. Years of emotional repression. Everything exploded. I regret marrying you. Silence instantly consumed the room. Even the fire seemed to stop crackling. Alice froze. For a moment, she genuinely believed she had misheard him. Her lips parted slightly. What? The single word barely emerged above a whisper. Adrian's heart pounded violently. The moment the sentence left his mouth, regret followed. Yet he was too proud to take it back. Too wounded to admit uncertainty. Too stubborn to retreat. I regret marrying you. The repetition felt even. Alice stared at him, searching his face, searching for hesitation, searching for love, searching for anything that suggested he did not mean it. She found nothing. Only anger. Only coldness. Only distance. The man who once confessed his feelings among blooming roses seemed to have vanished completely. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Do you really mean that? Again he hesitated. Again pride answered before his heart could. Pack your bags and leave. The words echoed through the room. This time there was no misunderstanding. No possibility of interpretation. No room for hope. Alice's heart broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. The kind of heartbreak that arrives when the person you trust most becomes the source of your deepest pain. Several moments passed. Neither moved. Neither spoke. Alice waited. Surely he would stop this. Surely he would realize what he was saying. Surely he would apologize. But Adrien remained motionless. The silence became her answer. Slowly she nodded. The movement seemed almost mechanical, as though her body continued functioning while her spirit struggled to catch up. Very well, Your Grace. The formal title hurt more than any accusation. Yet Adrien said nothing. Alice turned and walked toward their bedroom. Every step felt heavier than the last. Behind her, Adrien remained rooted in place. Part of him wanted to run after her. Part of him wanted to explain. Part of him wanted to admit he was confused and afraid. Instead, he stayed silent. Hours passed. The palace remained unusually quiet. Servants noticed luggage being prepared but asked no questions. Alice packed only what belonged to her. Clothing, books, personal keepsakes. Nothing more. She touched their wedding portrait one final time. For several seconds she stared at the painted image. They looked happy, hopeful, in love. The strangers in the portrait seemed impossible to recognize now. A fresh wave of tears threatened to overwhelm her. She forced herself to remain composed. If Adrien truly wanted her gone, she would leave with dignity. Near dawn, she stepped into the courtyard. A carriage waited. No farewell gathering. No dramatic scene. Only a woman leaving the life she had built. As she climbed inside, she glanced once toward the palace windows. No lights appeared. No figure emerged. No voice called her name. The carriage rolled away. Alice never looked back again. When morning arrived, Adrien entered the dining room expecting silence. What he encountered felt worse. Absence. Her favorite chair sat empty. Fresh flowers no longer decorated the table. The small details she brought into every room had disappeared. He told himself it didn't matter. He focused on work. Hours later, he returned to his study. Her absence followed him. Days passed. The feeling worsened. The palace felt colder, larger, unfamiliar. Every corner contained reminders. A book she once recommended. A garden path she loved. A window where she often waited. For the first time, Adrien began questioning himself instead of Alice. Then everything changed. One afternoon, palace guards arrested the servant Victoria had bribed months earlier. Faced with evidence and punishment, the terrified man confessed everything. The forged letters, the false rumors, the fabricated records. Every accusation against Alice had been carefully manufactured. Every doubt had been built upon lies. Adrien listened in stunned silence. Each confession struck harder than the last. By the end, only one truth remained. Alice had been innocent. Completely innocent. The room spun around him. His breathing became uneven. He remembered her tears, her voice, her disbelief, the way she had begged him to look at her and trust her. And he hadn't. For the first time in years, the Duke collapsed into a chair and buried his face in his hands. The woman he loved was gone, and he was the one who had driven her away. Far beyond the borders of the duchy's capital, Alice traveled toward an unknown future, determined never to return. While behind her, a broken man finally understood the terrible cost of the words he could never take back. The confession destroyed the last illusion Adrien had been clinging to. For days after learning the truth, he barely slept. Every quiet moment forced him to relive the night he had accused Alice. He remembered the disbelief in her eyes, the tremble in her voice, and the heartbreaking dignity with which she accepted his rejection. No punishment he gave Lady Victoria felt severe enough. No apology spoken into an empty room felt meaningful. Most painful of all was the realization that Alice had trusted him completely. And he had failed her completely. The palace no longer felt like home. Every room reminded him of what he had lost. The garden where they once shared breakfast. The library where she left notes inside his books. The sitting room where she waited countless evenings for a husband who never made enough time for her. Now she was gone, and for the first time Adrien understood loneliness. Not the loneliness of an isolated childhood. Not the loneliness hidden behind responsibility. This was different. This was the loneliness of losing the person who made life worth sharing. 3 days after the confession, Adrien gathered his advisors. "I am leaving." The room fell silent. One advisor frowned. "For how long, Your Grace?" "As long as necessary." "Where are you going?" Adrien's answer came without hesitation. "To find my wife." The search began immediately. Weeks became months. Adrien traveled farther than he ever had before. He visited villages hidden among rolling hills. He questioned merchants arriving from distant regions. He spoke with farmers, innkeepers, blacksmiths, and travelers. Whenever someone mentioned a beautiful young woman helping others, hope surged inside him. Most leads ended in disappointment. Yet he refused to stop. The search changed him. His polished appearance gradually disappeared. His expensive clothing gathered dust from endless roads. His face grew leaner. Dark circles settled beneath his eyes. But for the first time in his life, appearances mattered less than purpose. Each day carried only one objective. Find Alice. Apologize. Pray she would listen. Winter never arrived that year, but spring eventually spread across the countryside. Wildflowers covered meadows with vibrant colors, and fresh leaves appeared on ancient trees. One afternoon, Adrien arrived in a small village near the edge of. The settlement was modest but cheerful. Children laughed near a community garden, while villagers worked together repairing fences and planting crops. Adrien nearly continued past them. Then he saw her. Time seemed to stop. Near a flower bed, surrounded by children carrying watering cans, stood Alice. His heart nearly forgot how to beat. Months had passed since he last saw her. Yet she looked exactly as he remembered. And completely different. The sadness that once haunted her expression had softened. She looked peaceful, strong, independent. She had rebuilt a life without him. For several moments, Adrien simply stood there. Unable to move. Unable to speak. Terrified. Because finding Alice had been difficult. Facing her would be even harder. A little girl tugged Alice's sleeve and pointed toward him. Alice turned. The moment their eyes met, shock crossed her face. The watering can slipped slightly in her hands. Neither moved. Neither spoke. The world around them faded. Only silence remained. Adrien slowly approached. Every step felt heavier than the last. When he finally stopped before her, words abandoned him. The speech he had rehearsed countless times disappeared. All that remained was truth. Without warning, he dropped to his knees. Gasps spread through the village. Children stared in confusion. Adults exchanged stunned looks. A duke was kneeling in the dirt. But Adrien no longer cared about dignity. He had lost the right to protect his pride the night he broke Alice's heart. "Alice," he said quietly. His voice trembled. "I was wrong." Tears immediately filled her eyes. Not because she expected those words, because she had once believed she would never hear them. Adrien lowered his gaze. I was cruel. His throat tightened. I allowed lies to poison my judgment. The villagers gradually stepped away, giving them privacy while remaining close enough to witness the extraordinary scene. Alice remained silent. Adrien continued. I trusted strangers more than I trusted the woman I loved. The final words hung between them. Loved, not past tense, present tense. Alice felt her chest ache. Months earlier, she had dreamed of hearing him speak openly. Now that he finally was, the words carried equal amounts of comfort and pain. Adrien reached into his coat. His hand shook as he removed a small velvet box. Inside rested her wedding ring, the same ring she left behind before departing the palace. I carried this every day. Alice stared at it. Memories flooded her mind. Their wedding, their vows, their happiness, their collapse. Adrien's eyes glistened. When you left, I finally understood what my life would become without you. A tear slipped down his cheek. I told myself I was protecting my heart by keeping my emotions hidden. He laughed bitterly. But all I really did was hurt the person who mattered most. The vulnerability in his voice felt completely genuine. For the first time since meeting him, Alice saw no duke, no ruler, no powerful nobleman, only a man carrying regret. A man who had traveled across a kingdom searching for forgiveness. Alice, he whispered, if you hate me, I understand. She immediately shook her head. Hatred had never been the problem. Pain had been. Disappointment had been. Love had always remained. That was what made everything hurt so much. Adrien continued speaking. I don't deserve another chance. The honesty surprised her. But I need you to know the truth. He took a shaky breath. I love you. The words emerged with remarkable simplicity. No hesitation. No restraint. No fear. Just truth. The truth he should have spoken months earlier. I loved you when we met. Another tear rolled down his face. I loved you when we married. His voice cracked. And I loved you every day after that, even when I was too foolish to show it. Alice's vision blurred. Part of her remembered every lonely evening. Every unanswered hope. Every tear she cried after leaving the palace. Another part remembered the man who once walked through gardens with her. The man who listened to her dreams. The man who looked at her as though she were extraordinary. The conflict raged inside her. Then she noticed something important. Adrien was not asking her to forget. He was not making excuses. He was accepting responsibility. The difference mattered. Slowly she stepped forward. Adrien held his breath. Alice reached out and placed her hands against his cheeks. The familiar warmth nearly shattered his composure. You hurt me. The statement was gentle but honest. I know. You broke my heart. His eyes closed briefly. I know. For several seconds she studied him. Then a small smile appeared through her tears. You are very late, Adrien. Hope flashed across his face. A laugh escaped her despite everything. But I'm glad you finally came. The words felt like sunlight after endless darkness. Adrien rose to his feet and pulled her into his arms. This time there was no hesitation. No distance. No fear. He held her as though letting go would be the greatest mistake of his life. The villagers erupted into applause and cheers. Neither noticed. They were too busy finding their way back to each other. Months later, beneath an archway covered in blooming roses, they renewed their vows before friends, villagers, and members of the duchy. This time Adrien spoke openly. I love you, Alice. She smiled with tears shining in her eyes. I know. The answer drew laughter from the crowd. From that day forward, they rebuilt their marriage through honesty, patience, and trust. Difficult moments still existed, but neither allowed silence to replace communication again. Flourished under their leadership, and the people admired them not because they were perfect, but because they had overcome imperfection together. For generations afterward, the kingdom remembered the beautiful woman who walked away without a word and the duke who crossed an entire realm to bring her home. proving that true love is not measured by never making mistakes, but by having the courage to correct them before it is too late.